That was your transition that you were hyping up.
Ah, come on, that was
Not
awesome.
bad. It's not bad. It was all right. It was all right. Uh, yeah. Let's talk about their first game then. So, uh, as always, source for this one, I was able to find a video on YouTube which showed basically the entire game. The last like couple of minutes got cut off, but that's all right. Also used a little bit of Wikipedia and Transfer Market as I usually do. All right, so let's dive into the story itself then. So at this point in MLS's history, there have been four new expansion sides since the league began in 1996. That being Chicago, Miami, RSL, and Chivas. The combined record for these teams' first game is 1-1-2, with Chicago beating Miami in 1998. The two expansion sides faced off in their first game. And in 2005, RSL drawing the Metro and Chivas losing to DC United. And also, on a side note, in 1998, when Chicago and Miami played each other, somebody had to win. It was still the era of shootouts in every single game if it was tied. So there was going to be a winner for an expansion side, no matter what. However, that was still the only first game win for an expansion side to this date in MLS history. So the track record was not great for expansion sides, especially with how poor the two expansion sides were from the previous season in 2005. However, Houston was different as they were not really a true expansion size. They were merely just a relocated side from San Jose, as Andrew had spoken about. Um, and mind you, San Jose was a side that just won the Supporter Shield last season. So pretty good starting ground to work with. Also add to that the team basically held on to all of its key players from the season prior through the relocation. And it makes it feel even less like a new side to the league. However, this was technically the first ever game for the Houston Dynamo, and they were set to take on the Colorado Rapids. The Dynamo would march out a strong lineup with the likes of Onstad, Ching, and De Rosario, just a few of the big names in the team. The Rapids would likewise send out a team with plenty of familiar faces as well, such as legendary keeper Joe Cannon, defender Mike Petke, and a 23-year-old Kyle Beckerman. The Rapids were a formidable team, bolstering the second best defense in the Western Conference the season prior, only behind the Quakes themselves. So this was no walk in the park for Houston's first game. However, when we get into the game itself, maybe it was the adrenaline to be able to get the first ever Houston goal, but Houston had most of the early chances in the game, picking up right where they left off the season prior. The breakthrough finally came in the 13th minute after Wade Barrett spins and hits a which fadeaway pass, which just finds the foot of Ching, who pokes it past Cannon to score the first ever Houston Dynamo goal. Now, don't get too complacent because just 2 minutes later, the youngster, and I can't believe I'm using that term, Beckerman, has a hit from way downtown, which rifles past Onstad to level the score. You could say at least it's already an exciting debut game. Uh, then we do hit a lull in the game in terms of goals for a little while, but don't worry, there are still plenty of goals to come. And one of those plenty was in the 37th minute after De Rosario collects a loose ball and lays it off to Brian Mullen on the right flank. He proceeds to place in a perfect cross to find an unmarked Brian Ching to put Houston back in front. And don't worry, we've still got more in this half. In the 44th minute, right before the half, who else but Brian Ching would score again after Mullen whipped in another great cross to find an unmarked Ching to head home, giving him a first half hat trick in Houston's first ever game. All right, now we're at halftime. And if the second half is anything like the first, we're in for a treat. While all the attention was on Brian Ching and his first half hat trick, Colorado were not out of this game. And early in the second half, they would make that abundantly clear. Jovan Karofsky in the 52nd minute would take a free kick just outside the box and bang it past Odstead to make it 3-2. However, if there was one man to make sure that Brian Ching's special night was not spoiled, it would be Brian Ching himself. In the 72nd minute, De Rosario would whip in a corner to find who else but Brian Ching to not only score his fourth goal of the game, but also get a hat trick of headers at this point. For the love of everything, somebody mark this man, please. This goal would solidify the first ever win for the Dynamo, but they did tack on one more goal, as in the 92nd minute, Alejandro Moreno would find a loose ball floating in the air in the box and would bicycle kick the ball home to make it 5 goals and also give Houston the goal of the week. You cannot get a more exciting first ever game than this. 7 total goals, 4 from one player, and a bicycle kick to round it off. It was an unbelievable debut for the Dynamo, which may have been the start of a special season for the squad, but I won't go into the details of that because that will be for another episode of MLS History Retold.
I love when people tell me that there's no fun storylines or they can't get excited about MLS. Like stuff like this is what we're talking about. You can't you
4
can't
games on a debut game is insane.
you can't look at things like this and be like, oh well, it's what does it mean anyway? You find meaning in things you want to find meaning in, right? I can look at anything and be like, oh, it doesn't matter. I can go and say the UEFA Champions League doesn't matter because Europe and it's not my country, right? Of course, I enjoy it, but if you want to find enjoyment, you'll find enjoyment. This is what we're talking about here. Absolutely unreal scenes, legendary stuff out of Brian Ching in Houston to the point I believe he had a testimonial game at the end of his career, didn't he? This is where it all starts, right? Um, yeah,
It
I
took
love
one
this.
game to become a Houston legend.
Yeah. People remember, like I said, it was the first thing in the Reddit when I was like, oh, Houston fans, what do you got? They're like, first game ever. That
Of course.
so
The fans
um
that have been around since the first day. I mean, I still remember Atlanta's first goal ever. So I'm sure it's meaningful especially when you score 4. Like that's something you're never
correct.
gonna forget.
And that's what it's all about is those connections, not just for the casual fan. It's for the people who have been there,